Hello and welcome to the 2 Minute Drill. And today we have a very special mock draft. We've seen you guys crying for it. You want the mock drafts, and we are bringing it to you. That's Bailey Kumar. I'm Michael Rochman. Bailey's going to take the odd picks. I'm going to take the even picks, and we don't have a ton of time, so we're going to zoom through it because we know you guys are used to 2 minute content. You aren't ready for a full round of picks and analysis. We're going to give it to you anyway. Bailey, Tennessee Titans on the clock. This is your team, your favorite team. Who are they taking?
Yeah, a bit of an unfortunate season for the Titans. I think in 2024, almost everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. Will Levis took a step back. Their big FA acquisition and trades didn't pan out the way they wanted to. So here they are picking number one due to some last week, I don't know how else to say it, but fuckery. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rumors that they're going to trade down the Giants, but I think after this free agent period, it's pretty clear that they intend to stick at one and they intend to take a QB. I think the clear pick here is Cam Ward for them. He's just the only QB in this class that is worth taking number one. Comparatively to like maybe previous years, Ward maybe would not be like the top overall selection. We've seen some really strong QB classes, but in this class, I think he's okay to take at one. I think he is worthy of a first overall pick. His arm talent in escapability and the way he can extend plays is just something you can't teach. And the rest of the things that you kind of want him to improve, I think can be fixed at the next level. So I think the Titans got the QB here, and hopefully this one works out. Not a great history with QBs for this franchise.
Yeah, I think he's a quarterback, but there's definitely some risk with the play style and demeanor that he carries in terms of just it's not a lot of in pocket structure, but I think there is a lot of flashes of that ability. So I trust his natural touch and natural abilities to kind of work out in the NFL. Moving on though to the number two pick, Cleveland Browns, a team that is used to picking early in the draft. Unfortunately, they had some success and they've fallen back down the ranks. We're gonna have them go Abdul Carter. I know they've got the extension worked out with Miles Garrett. He's there long term in Cleveland, but I think when you pair two elite edge rushers with each other, it's bound to create some chaos on the opposing offenses with teams like the Ravens and Bengals in the division with Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. They're throwing the ball, running the ball, whatever they're going to do. You want to get some pressure on them, make them uncomfortable, and I think you best do that by having Abdul Carter opposite of Miles Garrett for a very elite edge rushing tandem.
Yeah, what a rise for Carter this draft cycle. Definitely on tape one of the most dominant players I've seen this cycle. Just a great fit next to Garrett, as you said. Obviously, QB is a consideration here for the Browns as well. They could easily go Shedeur, but I think the Browns have built this identity of winning through their defense and letting their QBs and offense kind of game manage their way through through the offense to get victories, and this is kind of the trend that they followed. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me here at number two.
Yeah, I'm not ruling out Kirk Cousins eventually making his way to Cleveland. I know Atlanta said that they'd like to keep him on roster. I don't buy it entirely. We'll see what happens though. Number three pick, New York Giants, another team that is considering quarterback. What do you have them doing?
Yeah, I have them going quarterback here. I have them taking Shedeur Sanders. I mean, Dable and Schoen are kind of at the end of the ropes with their job. I think this is just like a known thing for everybody that if they do not have a successful season this year, that they're probably going to be fired. I think they would have been fired last year if they didn't have such a good draft class in 2024. So I think I do think they'll end up with a vet QB eventually in the free agency. Like they'll go with a Russell Wilson or an Aaron Rodgers, and maybe they'll go a different direction in QB here. But the way the rosters are now, they can't roll into the season with. I don't even know who their QB one is right now. Is it Tommy DeVito? I don't know who else
I
is on
believe
their
so. Yeah, he's the only guy
just on the
on the
roster.
roster.
So I think they go Shedeur here, and I know this isn't going to be like a super popular pick. A lot of people don't like Shedeur, but at the end of the day, he's an extremely pro-ready QB. He can pretty much fit into any system, any concepts you want him to do, he can do, and I think that he's going to be a great fit, especially with Dayball and with Neighbors. And I think Shedeur is good enough to save their jobs, which is why I think he's going to be the pick here if the Giants don't address their QB room.
Yeah, I think there is going to be some desperation. And I think if you're a guy like Dable, you say, look, I know I can bring it in terms of offensive play calling and scheming. I see someone who can deliver. And I think Sanders has a very high floor. You know, even with guys like Milrow, who I think maybe have a higher ceiling, there's just so many like outcomes where Milrow just does not take that next step in the NFL. And it's disastrous for a franchise. If you're Dable and Schoen who need to have that year one success, you can't bet on that. So a guy like Sanders, who I think is pro ready, I think has a lot of the safe floor values that's going to bring in some effective passing concepts, easy accuracy, nice touchdown field. You're going to get that out of Sanders, and I think it's going to at least do a good job in making sure that you can get another year with your tenure there. And, moving on to number 4, we're going to take his teammate, Travis Hunter, the wide receiver, cornerback, whatever you want to label him, out of Colorado. I think this is someone that the Patriots are going to primarily play at receiver, especially with Gonzalez and Carlton Davis now at cornerback. But I do think that you're going to see Hunter get on the field still on defense. I don't think he's a guy that you can really justify limiting to just one position and one side of the ball. I think he's someone that is just so talented on both sides that even if you're maybe limiting his touches as a receiver and limiting his snaps as a cornerback, you want to have that ability to where he can contribute on both sides. And I think for the Patriots, obviously the desire is that they get a wide receiver 1, and I think Hunter can be that. I compared him to Garrett Wilson. Uh, I think that getting a guy like this at number 4, I know a lot of people kind of think, oh, if he's not going to be playing both ways, if he's not going to start both ways, is he still worth that top pick? In my mind, I think he is. He's a very instinctual, intelligent, and productive football player. I think the Patriots will be more than happy getting him here at 4.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if, even if Hunter only played one side of the ball, whether that be wide receiver or corner, I think he'd still go pretty high in this draft. And when you add both, I think that, yeah, he's an easy pick for the Patriots at here. And I don't even think the Patriots need to like define him as like a wide receiver or cornerback right now. I think they will play him at both and kind of see what he sticks better at in the NFL. He's just such a dynamic player on both sides of the ball that I feel like you said, limiting him to one side would be a pretty big waste. I am interested in seeing the snaps he plays in the NFL if they're gonna let him play both sides of the ball. I'm not sure if like like in the Patriots case, like would they just play him like slot corner or would they rotate him in with their corners? So I'll be interested to see his usage in the NFL if he does end up with the Patriots.
Yeah, it'd be a weird fit just if he were to try to go on defense just because they paid so much money to Carlton Davis. But I think he's just so talented that you're more than happy just keeping a fresh rotation for all 3 guys. Especially if Davis goes down though later in the year, I think we could see Hunter start to really expand on his defensive role. If per se he's already like the wide receiver 1 for the team, it wouldn't shock me if Edelman esque type step in. But obviously, there's a lot more experience for Hunter on that side. But moving on now to a team that has revamped their entire front office, revamped their entire coaching staff. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Who you got them going with number 5?
I have them going Mason Graham here from Michigan. This is a more of a predictive mock more than what I would do mock. I'm not the biggest fan of Mason Graham, honestly, but it seems like the NFL is a bit higher on him than I am. I think he is like a very dynamic player at the defensive line, and the Jags have a huge holder right now. Uh, I don't know who they have on their D line actually. Devon Hamilton, I think that's the only guy I can name right now. So yeah, they definitely
Armstead,
need.
man, come on.
Oh, they did sign, but does Armstead play the D line or edge? Okay, no, it doesn't matter. Uh, yeah, so Graham does fit in there nicely in a position that they desperately need talent in right now. This I'm not. I'm always curious about like first time GMs and head coaches. They tended to play it safe with their first pick, and I do think Graham is a really safe pick here at 5. I think he's guaranteed to at least be a pretty productive player, no matter how high his ceiling is. I think he has a really solid floor, and that's kind of what you want to do as a GM in your early stages. Kind of take some safer picks, get some like for sure productive players. Don't get dropped any busts, and I think Graham's bust potential is pretty low.
Yeah, Graham's a really exciting player, and I think when it comes to his contribution to the pass rusher, he is someone that is just a wrecking ball when it comes to attacking on the interior. He does really well handling his one-on-ones. I feel like he definitely benefited playing next to Kenneth Grant. I think that's a situation where each guy is going to have a little bit of a knock against them just because the caliber of their counterpart was just so high. But I still really believe in both of them, and I think Mason Graham is going to be someone that's going to be very exciting. Find a spot for him on this defensive line, help him out in the trenches to help others. Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker are going to benefit. Eric Armstead's going to benefit, and they're all just going to find ways to feast. And I think that's a great way to set up your defense to be just very dominant in the AFC South, where, having that strong front 7 could really kind of re-change everything about the Jaguars to where they are maybe winning games with their defense and they're trying to find ways on offense through a sharp mind and Liam Cohn, and they really kind of flip things around and immediately go as a team that is contending to win the title in that division. They're an exciting team, and I know there's a lot of potential there, and I don't think it's a hot take to say that they can really turn things around in one off season. But even though all the cuts, all the restructures, and all the changing pieces, it wouldn't shock me if the Jaguars are still making some noise this season. But moving on to number 6, a team that has figured out their quarterback situation by trading for Geno Smith, the Las Vegas Raiders, and I think they've set themselves up perfectly to draft Ashton Jeanty. This is an old school coach who knows the value of a running back. He operated with a team that was very reliant on Marshawn Lynch, and I think he found a lot of success with it. I've heard some comparisons to Ashton Jeanty to Marshawn Lynch. I think the defense is very strong. There's a lot of capabilities on that side. Getting a guy you can rely on in the running game is super valuable, and I think Jeanty does that extremely well for this Raiders roster. I think a lot of people talk about the running back and positional value, and there's going to be fans who are just scoffing at the idea of taking one at six. But I think when you have a situation where your quarterback isn't necessarily the superstar guy that you can rely on for every snap of the play, it is so valuable to have a running back that can be the center of your offensive game plan. Even if you think you can get similar production out of another running back in the second, third round, having a guy that is such a high caliber impact player out of the backfield does so much for an offense in terms of opening up opportunities and keeping the game plan just completely balanced to where I think this is going to be beneficial for everyone. And I think Ashton Jeanty is going to be a complete stud.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. And, combining Genty with Brock Bowers is going to make that offense so fun to watch. And you got somebody with Gino who maybe trusts his arm a little too much based on how good he is and, kind of getting older there. So if anything, it's going to be must watch TV whenever they have the ball.
Yeah. Now moving on to the AFC East, New York Jets. How do you have them going at number 7?
I have them going with Amon Membu. This is a guy that I'm extremely high on myself, and that I think the NFL will be high on too. We just saw him crush the combine. I think when you turn on the tape, he is such a good player, such a good pass protector. He's such a good mover, and he's somebody that I think the Jets could really benefit from. At left tackle, they'll probably put Fashanu, and then they have Membu who can slide into that right tackle spot, his natural position. I think he's just a great fit for the Jets right now, who are still kind of maybe figuring out who they want as QB. They signed Justin Fields to that 2-year contract, maybe more of a gap QB as they look to the 2026 draft. I think they want to get maybe a QB there. I think they'll draft a QB there regardless, almost guaranteed. Then they want to kind of put him in a good situation starting off the bat where they have a strong O line. And if they get Membu here, that is a very strong O line moving forward.
Yeah, it's a really smart strategy to enter into that new organization, kind of build from the trenches. And I think getting a guy like Membu is a great step in that direction. Getting your two bookend tackles really sets the tone and starts to build up a strong foundation, especially for whoever's going to be the quarterbacking of the future in New York. At number 8, I have the Carolina Panthers. And it's a weird board. I don't think it's necessarily perfect, but a talent like Will Johnson slips to number 8. And I think with the need there at cornerback opposite of JC Horn, it makes a lot of sense. I like Michael Jackson. I think he's a really great third outside cornerback to rotate in. I don't think they paid him so much to where you kind of dismiss the idea. Will Johnson is someone that has great ball skills, great instincts, and he just crashes so well in zone coverage, but mirrors extremely effectively in man. He didn't measure in as big as I kind of expected at the combine. Some of the measurements were a little bit higher, but this is someone that I think just makes so many plays left and right. You turn on the tape in 6, 7 games this season, he was already putting up like great stat lines for an entire year. This is someone that is rarely targeted, and when he is, he makes people pay for it. This is a star cornerback, and even with J.C. Horn's injury concerns, I think you obviously paid him with so much confidence. Having that ideal cornerback duo of Will Johnson and J.C. Horn is just deadly for NFC South offenses going forward.
Yeah, Johnson's kind of a weird player. It seemed like he had a pretty solid year in 2024, and then he was projected to the top of the draft, and then he started falling down, kind of the top media guys boards for some reason. Maybe the NFL isn't as high on him as kind of this media, as fun, aren't as high as him as kind of the amateur guys like ourselves are, but I think he's a great fit. And like you said, JC Horn is definitely not the healthiest player in the league. He has, I believe, missed games almost every year in his career. And so, even if you do draft him and you sign Mac Jackson to that contract, he still will probably see some playing time. And yeah, this is a great fit for him. The Panthers are looking to kind of revamp that defense. They made a lot of big FA signings this season, and they still have a need at corner. So this is a pretty logical pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, so now moving forward to another NFC South team, and that's New Orleans Saints here at number 9.
Yeah, I have them going Will Campbell, offensive line, maybe guard, maybe tackle. We'll see. The Saints are kind of ending their cap hell period. I think next year is when their cap sheet starts to look super clean. And when you have a cap sheet that looks super clean, the best thing you can do is have good rookies on on that rookie skill contract. And I think that Campbell is just a great fit for the Saints, no matter what they end up doing with him. If they put him at guard, maybe they don't like what they see out of Trevor Penning, and they move him to guard, and they put Campbell at right tackle. Maybe they want to move Fuega back to right tackle. Wait, did he play right tackle or was he left tackle? I'm forgetting last year.
Left
Um,
tackle.
oh, in college. Was he right
Oh, he
tackle in
played right
college?
tackle at Oregon
That's
State.
what I
Yeah.
was trying to think. Yeah, he played right tackle in college. So maybe they want to move him back to that position if they didn't like what they saw him last year. So it gives them a lot of options to kind of put forward their best five, see what happens. I think Will Campbell is somebody that could play tackle. Maybe you want him as guard, and clean up the deficiencies he has at tackle before you make that switch to a year at guard and switch to tackle. So yeah, there's a lot of options they can do with Campbell, but I think this is just a player who you're kind of guaranteed will be productive no matter what, and that's what the Saints need right now.
Yeah, I think when you have a lot of moving pieces, when you have a inevitable rebuild coming, it's smart to get some versatility and some dependability. And I think Campbell has a pretty nice floor. I didn't love where he was being valued at as a top tackle in this class, just because I didn't see him in that way. But I think when you're taking him in that sort of 10 to 20 range, I think there's a lot more value there. And I think he can find a way starting onto an offensive line. I think there's going to be some teams that are definitely going to be interested in that range. And it wouldn't shock me if the Saints there at 9 are the first to pull the trigger. Moving on to number 10, though, I think Ryan Poles is sort of someone who follows the ideology of it's a copycat league. And I think when he watched Philadelphia Eagles, he saw just how much edge rushing talent helped out this team, kind of overcome any issues because they just had such dominance in the trenches and in their front seven. And I think he's going to do something similar. So I'm going with Shamar Stewart, edge rusher out of Texas A&M, a guy that many see as developmental, but you put him in a room that has Montez Sweat and Dio Adeyingbo on the opposite end. You get Shamar Stewart there rotating in as pass rusher, and you have that trio that I think can really develop into a dominant trio of run stuffing ability, pass rushing upside. I think there's a lot of potential there. I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about that. And I think with time, with development, and with that healthy ability to kind of rotate each and every guy, you're going to have a pretty strong defensive end group to where you can feel confident about your defensive line, your front seven each and every week. And I think a lot of people are assuming, oh, they've fixed one position, now they're going to address another position in the draft. It wouldn't shock me if they're double dipping because I think the Bears have done a nice job of filling out their lineup on paper. Now it's about filling out the rest of that roster, making sure that it's a strong 53 rather than a strong 22. And I think this is a good step in doing so.
Yeah, I agree. The Bears have done a really good job filling out their starting lineup where any pick they make here, except maybe at running back, is going to be a backup for them to start the year. So it kind of depends on what they think is their biggest weakness in terms of depth. And yeah, edge is definitely looking like something that they need help in. They did take Booker last year. Um, they took Booker last year, right? They traded
Yeah, yeah.
like for huge support for him. So yeah, they have him as a developmental guy. Maybe they want another developmental guy in there. On third downs, on passing rush downs, they kind of put all three on the field together with Stewart, Deo, and Sweat. So yeah, that could be something to do there. And I think pressure is the most important thing in the NFL, and it's never a bad idea to have as much pass rush talent as you can.
Yeah. So now heading over to the West Coast, San Francisco 49ers on the board. It's an interesting situation. Who do you have them take?
I have them taking Walter Nolan here. Three tech Ole Miss. I think he was the best player on that Ole Miss defensive line um this season and on a really good defensive team. So I think he was the one who was creating a lot of the stuff there. And I think the 49ers are trying to extend their window as much as possible. This is their last year of cheap Purdy. Who knows how much longer CMC is going to hold up? So this is kind of like they're seeing the windows closing, and it's really about who is going to help them the most right now. And I think Nolan is somebody who you can put in that three tech spot and be pretty happy with him playing like 600 snaps his rookie year and creating a lot of disruptions, a lot of penetrations from that three tech spot, which is what they want out of that position. I think he's a great scheme fit for Saleh again, who's back leading that 49ers defense. And yeah, I think this is just a pretty clear pick in my opinion for them.
Yeah, you made a huge effort in terms of bringing back Saleh as the defense coordinator, and I think in order to capitalize on that, you have to get him some better playmakers in that interior defensive line. There's some talent there. I don't think Kevin Givens is someone that gets enough credit, but overall, I think the defensive tackle position for this team is somewhat lackluster. So adding a guy like Nolan, who I think is such high upside, high ability, high potential, it's a great ad, and I think I trust a guy like Saleh to really make the most of it. And I think here at 11, some people may be surprised if he were to go that early on draft day, but I think talent and upside is absolutely there to warrant it. I'm excited to see what he can do, and I think he's going to be someone that is very exciting in the NFL, especially if he lands with someone as capable in developing that upside as Saleh. So now moving forward to number 12, Dallas Cowboys. They operate, it's not necessarily like unique or weird, but I think the unique part of them is that they are very chalk, whereas a lot of teams kind of stick to their guns and it feels like they ride with their own opinions. I feel like the Cowboys are pretty in line with a lot of consensus opinion. So here, when Tyrell McMillan falls to number 12, I feel like it makes a ton of sense, especially because CeeDee Lamb is someone that I think they like most operating out of the slot. So if you can get a guy like McMillan on the outside who has such great size, such great contested catch ability, especially when the opposing defense is going to have to focus all their attention on CeeDee Lamb, you're leaving McMillan with a lot of one-on-one opportunities on the outside with boundary corners that maybe can handle him, but a lot of guys are not going to have the size and ability to really match up with him. I think you're giving Dak Prescott another very reliable target. Obviously, there's some questions about the running game that could go with a guy like Hampton here at 12, but I think based on the fact that they just completely passed on running back last year, I would assume that they aren't as high on the position as other teams. So I would expect them to go with a wide receiver here, whether they love Golden, Burden, or McMillan. All three would make sense. But personally, I think McMillan makes the most sense in terms of the personnel that they already have and the game plans they seem to execute.
Yeah, the Cowboys have been looking for that wide receiver two next to Lamb for a while now. Brandon Cooks wasn't it, and I do agree with you that I think Lamb kind of works best out of the slot. And with Tet, you can kind of try and expose as many one-on-one matchups as you can, where teams are more likely looking to bracket Lamb. So I think that's a great scheme fit for them that really plays to Tet's strength. And um, with Dak, you sign him to that huge contract, and I think the Cowboys are kind of looking for a identity when, kind of in years past we're a defensive team, but I think they're ready to kind of move on to being that offensive focused team like they were in the past. I think Ted is a great fit for them to launch that.
Yeah. So now we get forward to the 13th pick, Miami Dolphins, another team that, maybe some questions about their identity going forward. Who do you have them selecting here with the 13th pick?
Well, the 13th pick, I have them selecting Jalen Walker here, edge, linebacker, whatever you want to call him, from Georgia. And this is somebody that I think that is a great fit for the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins' most successful kind of era of defense recently is when they had Andrew Van Ginkel. It's kind of that hybrid linebacker edge role. He now is playing kind of full-time edge, I believe, for the Vikings, but I think that hybrid role is somebody that they're looking for on the defense, and that's exactly what Jalen Walker fits to a T. I don't know in terms of measurables and traits of how good of a comp it is. But I think in terms of play style and usage is that we would see him in a very similar Andrew Van Ginkel role. He gives some snaps on the inside linebacker, give you some snaps as a pass rusher. You kind of do it all. And that's what the Dolphins need. They need playmakers on that defense right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate it. I think there's obviously Jalen Phillips and Chop Robinson coming off the edge. Bradley Chubb's hopefully going to be back. So there's no doubt like pass rushers, but having that versatility, guys that you can move around the defense adds a ton of luxury for a defense coordinator. I think it's something that could really pay off if it hits for them. I do think Walker's talented enough to work out. With the 14th pick, Indianapolis Colts, it's a little bit chalky, but we're going with Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. He's a guy that has great size, has great playmaking ability. He's not necessarily the biggest burner. You turn on the tape and you're noticing that he's maybe a little bit more stumpy than straight line fast, but he's someone that continuously wins at the catch point, finds ways to make miraculous catches, stacks really well on his defenders to where he's still winning downfield and making big plays, even though he maybe isn't the biggest speed threat. But he's someone that, the receiving ability is the reason that a lot of people will make the Gronk reference. I don't think he's Gronk ability, but I think there is a lot of similarities in terms of how they win as receivers. And I think that receiving production is probably going to carry over because they would constantly go at him with that Penn State game plan later on in the year. And they just continue to rely on him. Defenses continue to focus on him and he continued to produce. So I'm expecting him to be very successful in the NFL, especially in a receiving room that you have guys like Downs and Pierce and Mitchell and Pittman, obviously, where I think there's going to be way too much attention on the other receivers that are around him to where he's going to be able to find ways to succeed in the middle.
Yeah, this I don't know. We said this is a predictive mock, but maybe this is more of a prayer to Chris Ballard to finally address his position, something that he refuses to do. And Tyler Warren is somebody that, like you said, is so talented. Um, I would be interested in a scheme fit though, because Richardson is somebody who's a little bit like more vertical. We saw kind of when Richardson was in that offense that Pittman started getting ignored who's kind of like their underneath guy, and that he would prefer to throw the ball deep, which I'm not sure how much I like Warren in that role, but hopefully they kind of fix the offense where Richardson's more hitting some more underneath stuff. And yeah, I mean, what hasn't been said about Tyler Warren already? I'd be interested to see if they kind of use him to his full offensive capabilities, kind of, as that rusher, as a thrower too. And I don't know, maybe if Daniel Jones comes in and starts starting some games, we'd see an uptick in production from him. But right now, I think Richardson is the presumed starter, and hopefully Warren is somebody who can just be another weapon on that offense, trying to give him as much help as possible.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting fit to see wherever Tyler Warren lands, how he's utilized in the offense. If they're giving him some quarterback scampers here and there or not. But moving forward to number 15, the Atlanta Falcons are on the board. Have you ever Raheem Morris adding to his roster?
Uh, I have the Falcons taking Mike Green, edge Marshall. The Falcons have been needing an edge rush for so long, and this is somebody who I think is the most maybe pro-ready edge rusher to come out of the draft. He is somebody who is just so dynamic. There's so many pass rush moves that he's capable of doing. He comes in very polished, and they need immediate help. They tried to trade for Judon last year. He wasn't that good, so this is kind of more of a permanent solution to the problem they're having. And these Rams defensive coordinators care about is rushers. They don't really care about run defense. So I think Green's a really good fit here.
Yeah, if I had to predict like one thing in this draft, it's the Falcons are gonna probably go Mike Green or James Pearson. I'm very little like doubts about that because Raheem Morris just loves the pass rush specialist type of edge rusher, and Mike Green is just so advanced in terms of his pass rush moves, his hand usage, and just the ability to break contact and fire around the outside. His bend is elite. He's someone that I think is going to be very exciting. And I think, for a guy like Raheem Morris who says, oh yeah, I can make up for any deficiencies in the run game. I can make sure that he's going to be covered. Just let him get after the quarterback, and that's how I'm going to be having the best defense possible. He's going to see a guy like Mike Green and just make sure that Terry Fontenot does not play any games, gets him on his roster, and yeah, I think it just makes way too much sense. So I'm expecting Mike Green to be the pick at 15, and that's probably going to be a pick that does not change at all for the next month. Moving forward, though, to number 16, the Arizona Cardinals, who I think double dip at receiver. From last year, they picked Marvin Harrison Jr. I think this year they take Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. I think this is the perfect add to a receiver room that, could definitely use some additional help opposite of Harrison, allow some opportunities to where Harrison isn't necessarily pigeonholed into one role or one aspect of his skill set to try to contribute to the offense. Get Golden as a guy that also has a lot of variety in terms of what he can produce. He can produce underneath. He can operate as a deep threat. He wins over the middle of the field. He has a lot of great aspects to his game. He's very polished. He's someone that I think what impressed me most wasn't necessarily when he took the lead as the number one wide receiver at Texas, but when he started the year and they were trying to have Bond as that number one guy because they paid him the more NIL money and everything. And Golden still found ways to contribute as that third read in the offense because he's just so effective at separating, so refined with his route running. This is a guy that even if you put him into a small role and say, hey, go earn it, he's going to find a way to make an impact and he's going to earn it and eventually work his way up the board. I think he can be very talented wherever he lands. And in Arizona, where they could use some additional pass catchers, I think that would be a very good add and help Marvin Harrison really flourish too.
Yeah, this was kind of an unfortunate board for the Cardinals. I think they kind of pick an unfortunate spot where a lot of their other needs are kind of either taken or they're not great in terms of value wise. And so I think adding a wide receiver here is good. Obviously Marlon Harrison Jr. People will say he had a disappointing rookie year. I mean, objectively he had a pretty solid one. I just think it's kind of was under what was expected for him. We expected kind of this generational guy, and he got like 800 yards. But yeah, when you add him to that offense with Harrison and Trey McBride, who's already so dynamic for them, this is just adding another layer, another headache for the defense to worry about, and trying to just get Kyler as much help as possible to execute the offense that they need to. They can go. I think yeah, the pick here is either wide receiver or maybe defense for them.
And so now that moves us forward to pick number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals on the clock. They just broke news that Jamar Chase T. Higgins have been extended as we're recording this. So now, how are you going to help the Bengals further pursue their Super Bowl contention?
This may not help further the Bengals Super Bowl contention this year, but unfortunately, the extensions for those two, it seems like Trey Hendrickson may be the odd man out. So I had the Bengals taking Michael Williams, edge from Georgia. There's somebody who I think is an upside prospect. He's not somebody who I think I would feel comfortable with right away, relying for pass rushing snaps. Kind of more something that you'd have to be willing to develop. So maybe the plan here would be play Hendrickson in the last year of his deal, tag and trade him, and hopefully in that year, you developed Williams to the point where you're comfortable with him starting. They do also have Miles Murphy, but Miles Murphy, he's kind of been a disappointment so far. I think he had 0 sacks last year, which is obviously not ideal. So they should be looking for help in this area. I don't think that their future at edge is set at all. And for it being such an important position, I think this is an area that they need to address pretty direly.
Yeah, the Bengals love those bigger edge rushers. It seems to be a franchise tendency for them when it comes to drafting, and Michael Williams fits that to a T. Obviously, the pass rushing production was disappointing last season, and for some that may make Michael Williams a non-starter when it comes to the Bengals draft pick. But I think the Bengals won't see it such a, how did he produce? Okay, yes or no. They're going to say, what can we turn him into? And I think he can make those steps as a pass rusher to kind of become what they're looking for on the edge. And I think playing opposite of Trey Hendrickson for a year or maybe for long term will help him develop that. But right now, the future of Hendrickson is sort of up in the air. So we'll see what happens there. But I like Williams there with Cincinnati. Moving forward to that 18th pick, I have the Seahawks going Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle out of Texas. Look, Abe Lucas was talented when he was playing, but he's been very injured. He's been beaten up. I think you take a guy that you know is going to be a stud offensive lineman, whether that's a tackle, whether that's a guard, and you're going to be a lot happier about it. We've seen Sam Darnold under pressure, and there's times where he's been able to handle it, but in the playoffs, we saw him just look completely lost. You can't risk making a big deal with him like this and then seeing him lose that confidence. So you need to reupholster the offensive line, add to the trenches. And I think getting a guy like Banks, where I think he would be the long term right tackle. Uh, I just don't trust Lucas long term right now based on the availability that he's had. But even if he is on the inside at guard, I think Kelvin Banks has just been such a dominant force for Texas. 3-year starter and is entering the league as a 3-year player out of college. This is someone that I think is just proven time and time again that he can be a successful player, and I expect that to translate over to the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not as maybe as optimistic long term of Banks' spotted right tackle as maybe you are. I think maybe he'll be a guard on the next level, but he definitely has the potential to maybe try out a tackle. Maybe he does stick there, maybe he doesn't. And yeah, it'd be a good insurance for Abe Lucas when if he can stay healthy, obviously that's ideal. And then maybe Banks can play more of a guard role. And if he goes down, Banks can slide over into that spot and provide some much needed relief. This is a pick that kind of makes sense from a team building perspective. Maybe the Bengals it's not the Bengals. Maybe the Seahawks try to address something that's maybe like a bit more of a, like an instant need or like an immediate impact need. Depends how close they are. They think to compete into a championship. So maybe they play it a little bit more safe here, a little bit more of the long game and go Banks, who's more of a longer term building block.
Yeah, they have some interesting pieces on the board. I think this is a very intriguing available options list for them. But overall, I think Banks, it's one of those guys where you probably aren't really banking on him being there, no pun intended, but eventually he falls on the board and you say, look, we have a high enough grade on him. We know that he's talented. We'll find where it can work and we'll be happy to have him on the roster. So moving forward to pick number 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock. And who do you have them take?
I have the Bucs taking Jihad Campbell here, linebacker Alabama. This is I don't want to say another obvious pick because I feel like I'm saying this a lot, but I think this is something that's definitely a need for the Bucs. Long term solution on linebacker. They had Devin White for a couple years next to Levante David. Unfortunately, wasn't a solution. Levante David's still there, but he's getting up there in age. Who knows how many seasons he has left playing? And Campbell is somebody who I think is a long-term answer at linebacker. Uh, the Bucks also may ask Campbell to bulk up, add about 10, 15 pounds, maybe just 10, and maybe try and transition him to an edge rusher as a pass rusher, because that is also where he could be very useful to a defense. So it's really what they need the most here, where they need him the most long term, whether that be at kind of more like off ball linebacker or maybe as a pass rusher.
Yeah, and that versatility would be extremely beneficial for a team like Tampa Bay, where they have that need at edge rusher, they have that need at linebacker. Getting a guy like Campbell, who is working with Hassan Reddick and a trusted veteran like Levante David, you have him learning from two of the best at both positions to kind of expand on his skill set and maybe make that work with either position that you try him at. I agree with you though. Linebacker is such a huge need for Tampa Bay. I don't think KJ Britt is back on the roster. I think he's still a free agent, so he may end up signing a deal to come back to the team. But they keep doing 1-year deals with Levante David and keep kind of kicking the can down the road for when that hole is eventually going to be there. He's going to retire eventually. He can't last forever, even though he's doing his best effort to show that maybe he can. But you need the long term building blocks for this defense, and I think Jahad Campbell can do that, whether it's off the edge or at linebacker. He's someone that I think is very talented, very young, very athletic, and very instinctive. To where I trust him to make plays time and time again, no matter where he's lined up in that front seven. And with a guy like Bowles who seems to specialize in finding ways to get to the quarterback, finding ways to make an impact in that front seven, I think he'd have a lot of fun with Jahad Campbell. Moving forward to the 20th pick, the Denver Broncos are on the clock, and I have them going with Omarion Hampton. Maybe fate isn't going to allow this just because picking a UNC running back and eventually letting him walk. It would be weird to pick another North Carolina running back, but overall, I mean, when you look at the board, adding this type of talent to your backfield, letting him take on the workload, helping make the job easier on Bo Nix, it makes everything a lot easier. This is the second AFC West team that we have taking running back. But adding that ground game is huge for an offense, especially with an offense like Sean Payton runs, where he's seen the impact of guys like Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara and having on an offense. And Bo Nix was very solid last year. Make no mistake about it. I think he's a very promising young quarterback. But I think the best thing you can do for Nix is not try to fill up his plate with too much to do. Adding a running back like Omarion Hampton, who can take on a major workload, contribute in all facets of the game, kind of carry out through the trenches, through loaded boxes, make it very difficult to slow him down to where people are having to play up closer, opening up easier opportunities downfield for Knicks. That's how you get this offense to really take that next step. And I think it's a really smart way to go about it, especially since the Broncos really overachieved compared to last year's expectations entering the season.
Yeah, definitely the Broncos overachieved, but I think everybody saw them as I don't think anybody saw them as a playoff team, and they managed to do there behind that great defense and the great offensive line, which I think makes the Broncos such a good fit for Hampton. He is not somebody that I think you would really trust behind the bad O line right now. He's somebody who I think would heavily benefit from bigger holes. I don't really trust his vision and his elusiveness. He's more of like a straight line guy, so you really want as big as holes as possible and allow him to just kind of beat down defense. I think this is a like you said, a great fit for next year too. And when you kind of look at that year three leap, maybe you want to try and get Nick's an elite wide receiver. So who knows if you even have your first round pick again next year? The Broncos are certainly no strangers to trading away that first round pick. So may try to look at that a receiver. So this may be your last chance to kind of get that playmaker on the offense while you have Nick's on that cheap deal. And Hampton makes a lot of sense in terms of their need. Their rushing game outside of Nick's was pretty terrible last year with Williams and I don't even know who else they had up there on the top of my head. I'm totally blanking. But yeah, I think Hampton is a pretty big need for the Broncos, and I really love this pick.
Yeah, so now moving forward to 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's some quarterbacks on the board, maybe some other great prospects that are available. Where do you have the Steelers going?
I have the Steelers maybe taking a bit of a boring pick here. I have them taking Monowari here, safety from South Carolina. And this is somebody who I think is more of a needs fit than somebody who's like really exciting. You can kind of like get hopeful around, but this is a solid player who's pretty versatile, which is what the Steelers need. And they need somebody who to eventually replace Minkah Fitzpatrick in that role. He's kind of getting older. He's clearly lost a step in his defense. So you're gonna have and more worry play kind of wherever you need him right now. And then when Minka leaves via free agency, via trade, or however he leaves, you have somebody who's kind of that heir apparent at that spot.
Imon Warrior's a fun player, and I think he's someone that you can kind of plug all over the secondary. There's talks about people saying, hey, what do we think of him at corner? It'd be interesting. I don't know how much I really believe in him playing down on the boundary, but I think he's someone that can definitely plug in at the slot, in the box, back at strong safety, free safety, whichever you want him in, and he'll succeed. So I'm very excited to see what he can do. Moving forward, though, to the Los Angeles Chargers, 22nd pick, Jim Harbaugh gets his guy back on the interior. Kenneth Grant is the pick here, defensive lineman out of Michigan, a guy that can just absolutely stuff the interior of an offensive line, take on double teams, and make an impact. I think, like I talked about earlier with Mason Graham, he benefited a lot from playing next to Kenneth Grant because it's just having that much attention on such a big defensive lineman who can move like that. It opens up some very easy one-on-one lanes for the other defensive linemen. And I think, getting a guy like Kenneth Grant on the interior, when you have guys like Tui Pelotu, Khalil Mack on the outside, when you have other defensive linemen that have sort of, taken those steps with the new regime there in Los Angeles. I think adding a guy like Kenneth Grant is a great building block for continuing to build up your defense, but also helping the current roster really make those impacts and make those next steps as well.
Yeah, the thing, the basic question with Grant is, do you think he has that next step or the next gear to kind of be a NFL pass rusher from the nose tackle, or is he mainly going to just be a stopper? But either way, this is what the Chargers need. They need somebody in the middle of the field to clog up those lanes, clog up those gaps. And Grant was very special on tape this last season, just kind of shutting down the defensive line alongside Graham. And this is definitely somebody, like you said, some familiarity with the regime, you could say, and he fits a need here. So this is a bit of a perfect fit.
Yeah, so now moving forward to the 23rd pick, Green Bay Packers are on the clock. There's been talks about them looking into receiver, looking into continuing to bolster the defense. Where do you have them going here with pick number 23?
I have the Packers here taking James Pierce, edge from Tennessee. What used to be such a big strength for the Packers is pass rush has kind of fallen by the wayside with players aging out, players leaving, and now they're left with Rashawn Gary, who didn't have the greatest 2024, and Lucas Van Ness, who didn't take that step forward that everybody kind of expected him to. So suddenly, yeah, they kind of have this big gap at edge rusher, and they need somebody to create pressure. And Pierce isn't somebody that the Packers would traditionally draft. Doesn't really fit their mold of what they kind of look like out of those guys, but maybe with a new defensive coordinator, a new system, they're going to look to add somebody like Pierce, who's kind of that speed rusher who can just get after the quarterback. Maybe not the strongest in run defense, but somebody who can create pressure, which I think is what the Packers definitely need right now.
Yeah, I think playing opposite of Rashawn Gary, I think you can really trust a guy like Pierce to continue to make an impact. I think he's a little underrated in terms of what he can do as a run defender because he's not necessarily someone that's going to be this great container. But I think in terms of that wide stretch defense, being able to play outside, work laterally, I think he has a pretty solid base for how thin it is. I trust him to eventually develop into being a pretty solid run defender. I really like Pierce. I think there's a lot to be intrigued by. I understand the bend's not necessarily there for someone who's so much of a speed rusher. But in terms of just the ability to consistently win on the outside, win around with just that speed and that ability to kind of attack in his engagements, I feel like he's consistently producing enough to where I'm willing to kind of buy in, even though maybe it's unorthodox in the way that he wins. So he's someone that I'm intrigued by, and I like his fit there with Green Bay and with their current roster. With that 24th pick, we're sticking in the NFC North, and look, the Vikings desperately addressed cornerback last offseason, and unfortunately, it just didn't entirely pan out to where long term they're necessarily settled at the position. So I think in the first round here, they're going to go Trey Amos, cornerback out of Ole Miss. Getting that size, length, that man coverage ability on the boundary is something that Brian Flores prioritizes from his cornerbacks. And I think Trey Amos does it extremely well. Nice physicality, nice athleticism, great frame. He's someone that I think plays the outside a little bit better than some of the other cornerback options. I love Jahdae Barron, but I think you look at Barron as someone who would kind of be redundant with a guy like Byron Murphy in that secondary. So it wouldn't shock me to see Amos kind of leapfrog Barron with the right team. And I think Minnesota's the right team for him to where that works out really well.
Yeah, this is a great fit. The Vikings have a pretty big hole at corner. Obviously with Flores, you can kind of make magic out of anything without any corners, but Amos is somebody who can definitely take that defense to the next level. I think they surpassed everybody's expectations with how good that defense could be with kind of scrap parts. So you do your best to kind of fill the holes that are currently there. And outside corner is something that the Vikings desperately need. They desperately need that kind of shutdown corner on the outside who can kind of go against wide receiver ones for the other team and try to hold them at bay. And Amos definitely has the potential to be that. I really like his fit here in the Flores system and with the Vikings.
Yeah, so now moving forward to the 25th pick, the Texans, really one of the more surprising teams this offseason. They've been a lot more active in terms of headlines than I think a lot of people expected for a team that was a little strapped for cash after spending so much last offseason. What do you have the Texans doing here this offseason?
I have the Texans kind of patching a hole that they created themselves with taking Josh Simmons here. That's a tackle from Ohio State. This is probably not a pick that we would have made a month ago for the Texans, with Larry Tunsil at that kind of left tackle cornerstone position. But, Tunsil's no longer on the team. They traded him to the Commanders and create this hole for themselves. I'm sure that the Texans internally are pretty high on their tackles. If they're making a trade like this, they clearly have the confidence that either maybe through free agency or with their internal players that they'll have a solid O line beside CJ in front of CJ Stroud. because their offensive line was not great last year, and I think that was kind of the most shocking development in the Texans 2024 season when how bad that O-line was with all the talented players they have on it. And you can't really go into next season with a worse O-line if you're the Texans. So I think that you take Simmons here, who I think is the best pass protector, offensive tackle in the draft. He's somebody that, when you need to protect CJ Stroud, he's probably the guy I trust the most in the draft to kind of keep pressure off him, keep guys away from him, and kind of be a cornerstone left tackle prospect. The biggest question with Simmons obviously is the health. Is he going to be healthy in time for kind of week 1 of the NFL? There are rumors that he'll have a pro day sometime in April, which would be good for him. But even if he's not, and it's kind of like, oh, he's kind of a few weeks behind schedule where he thought he'd be, I still think that he's somebody who's long term can be that NFL left tackle. So even if you like your guys internally, he's somebody that I think would be the best fit for the Texans long term.
Yeah, if I knew he was going to be healthy, I'd probably be saying, he's a guy that goes here like at 9 to New Orleans, where you can move Flogger back to right tackle and you feel really confident about that bookend deal. But with the injury, I think he does slip a little bit down the board. It sounds like the NFL is a little bit more concerned about it. We aren't doctors, so we're more just speculating. But here for Houston, I think the connection of both being CJ Stroud the Buckeye and Josh Simmons the Buckeye helps a lot. I think just the overall tape is something to really buy into. And I think the talent's absolutely there. I trust that he'll be a very high end stud if he is 100% healthy. And I think at pick 25, it's worth the swing, especially right now with the current state of their offensive line. Maybe they do love Titus Howard and think that he's going to be the left tackle of the future, but I don't know. For me personally, I don't have that confidence. So with a talent on the board that's available like Joshua Simmons, I think you just have to take that risk and hopefully it pans out. With the 26th pick of the draft, the Los Angeles Rams are on the board, and I have them going Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. Look, they were rumored to be highly in on Brock Bowers, and I'm not saying Loveland is like going to be this Brock Bowers level impact player in the NFL, but I think Loveland has a similar type of skill set and talent and maybe even stock in my head compared to what Bowers was pre like absolutely blowing up as a rookie during his season. So I think for Sean McVay to see Loveland on the board here at 26 would be an absolute steal. He would find ways to get him involved. The receiving ability and upside and the athleticism is just absolutely there for Loveland. He had a little bit of an injury riddled campaign this year. He struggled in terms of just straight out production because the Michigan quarterbacks room was just underwhelming in all areas, no matter who was on the field. I think Loveland's going to be an absolute steal. Personally, I feel like I'm probably going to end up with Loveland as my tight end 1. I haven't done a full, complete report for both guys, so it's still a little bit up in debate, up in the air for me. But I think Loveland is just a tremendous tight end, a tremendous pass catcher, going to have a similar impact to like a Trey McBride that we've seen with Arizona. And I think for a guy like McVay, who we knew was heavily after Brock Bowers last draft cycle, I think he wants that playmaking ability at tight end. I don't trust Tyler Higbee long term for the Rams. So I think they're trying to get younger, and I think Loveland would absolutely do that while adding a tremendous element to their passing game.
Yeah, I agree. This is a bit of an intriguing pick, I think. I think the biggest question with Loveland is the blocking at that tight end spot with how much the Rams kind of value that blocking from the wide receiver spots. When they have Puka, Adams, and Loveland on the field at the same time, Loveland might be the worst blocker out of the three of them. That's going to be the biggest question here is if McVay looks at him and says, maybe he wasn't great at it at college. Is this something I think is more of a technique thing than a strength thing? And we can definitely coach him up where we're confident that we can stick him in line and have him run block for us long term. But the receiving upside you cannot deny, and the Rams are always looking for ways to feature their tight ends in their offense. We're always very, very heavily um in the game plan. And Loveland's somebody who I do think can take that offense to the next level and help the Rams win the Super Bowl while they still have Matt Stafford playing at a high level.
Yeah, the potential is absolutely there, and they're exciting. They had a little bit of question marks surrounding this upcoming season with the offseason rumors of Matthew Stafford going out, but it seems they're fully intent on running it back and seeing what they can do. They added Adams, they brought back Matthew Stafford. I think adding a receiving weapon like Colson Loveland, who I think still has plenty of potential to continue growing and be an inline tight end at the next level, I think it could really help elevate the offense even further than it already is. Now moving forward to another team that has Super Bowl aspirations, Baltimore Ravens. Not a lot of needs on this roster. What do you have them doing here at pick 27?
Yeah, I picked 27. The Ravens are always such a hard team to mock to because they just go pure BPA. So it's always in their head, who do they think is the best player available? For my money, it's Malachi Stark, safety from Georgia. This would be, in my head, a Marcus Williams replacement for them, who, kind of unfortunately fell off pretty hard in the 2024 campaign. They had to bench him and then eventually released him. And this is somebody who I think can slot into that role. They had a Darius Washington who was great for them last year, but I think Starks is a little bit more higher upside than he does. He's a little bit more rangier, just a little better than Washington and what he can offer there. The Ravens do have a couple other needs that I think might have be addressed here, corner and edge, but I think that by the way the board felt it's just the best pick for them and fills that hole that they obviously kind of highly value in that defense, that Marcus Williams role, who kind of stepped in and transformed that defense. And the defense was good in the second half of the year, but to get back to that elite level, I think they need a Stark side player back there at the safety position.
Yeah, I think Starks is extremely talented. I think he's someone that's fallen down the board a little bit because he was playing a different position this year and it wasn't going as fluidly. He's someone that can really kind of plug in all over the secondary, and you're not going to get like any negative production. He's someone that's going to contribute in any way that he knows how, and he's very exciting. He's someone that has stood out since his true freshman season as a stud for Georgia, and he's just continued to be that. I'm excited to see what happens, and it's just such a Baltimore pick to get like such a great player here at 27, and everyone would be like, no, we shouldn't have let this happen. But it's like, it's your own actions that caused this. So it wouldn't shock me if a player like Starks falls to them and then just ends up an absolute stud for the next 10, 12 years. But moving forward to the 28th pick, Detroit Lions, another team looking to bolster the trenches. I think they go Nick Scorton, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. I think he played heavier in the season than he weighed in at the combine. I don't think he was necessarily moving around the field like that at 260, probably more in that 280 range. Dropped weight for the combine, still decided not to test. But this is someone that I think playing opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, especially while Aiden Hutchinson is working to get 100%, I think having that pass rush rotation, getting him on the field more as Marcus Davenport rotates in, Josh Pascal, Hutchinson, having that four-man rotation keeps everyone fresh, hopefully keeps everyone healthier, and I think still continues to add to that pass rush department, gets you a potential long-term answer for that opposite of Hutchinson defensive end role. Um, I like Scorton. I think there is certainly some questions about the overall athleticism and bend, that natural twitch. But I think the overall power and that lateral mobility is still there to where I believe in what he can do as a strong side defensive end. And I think, when you have so much attention going to a guy like Hutchinson, having someone like Gordon who can kind of build up his confidence, start to really kind of gain those steps and develop in one-on-one situations until he's eventually becoming that next level contributor. I think it's a smart path, similar to what we talked about with the Browns, where getting that talent opposite of an elite edge rushing talent is going to help everyone involved. And I think for Detroit, when you kind of fell off in terms of that pass rush department, getting a guy like Gordon here is definitely how you kind of revitalize that unit and help upgrade your chances for 2025.
Yeah, we saw what happened to the Lions edge room last year with the injury. So this is definitely an area that I feel like they need to address. And Gordon's somebody who I think isn't somebody you can like rely on to be an edge one for you. He's much better in that kind of edge two role. I think him not testing is kind of a sign that his athleticism maybe isn't as great as we kind of saw on tape. And he is somebody that I think is willing to do the dirty work for your offense. He's willing to kind of eat those double teams, do whatever it takes to kind of open up pass rush lanes for Hutchinson. He is something that does require your intention. It's kind of, maybe a little bit risky to leave him one on one against maybe some of your lighter offensive tackles. Maybe you want like a tight end or a running back there to chip him, and you can't obviously chip him and Hutchinson at the same time without some major impacts to your offense. So this is somebody who I think is a great fit for the Lions and what they want to do, and is a great scheme pick and somebody who can help out on the run defense. And yeah, this is kind of a ideal kind of landing spot for him where he can kind of be that edge two and doesn't have to worry about producing like an edge one.
Yeah. So now moving forward to the NFC team that ended the Lions season, Washington Commanders, another team that out achieved expectations. What do you have them doing here at 29?
I have the Commanders taking Luther Burden here. This is somebody who may go way higher come the draft time. This is just based on, how kind of we're feeling right now, kind of predicting. It's kind of a hard landing spot for Burden with so many teams having that slot wide receiver spot filled up. And the Commanders just traded for Debo Samuel. Obviously, with their OC with Cliff, they love that quick stuff, the quick throws, the fast reads, and this is something that Burnham can step in and do very well. He is somebody who I think very heavily suffered in 2024 due to bad QB play. We saw what he could do and accomplish in 2023 a bit more. And if he took that another step forward in 2024, which I think he might have done with the better offense, that he could go like a lot higher. And you can say, oh yeah, he can play outside with confidence. But for right now, I don't feel comfortable projecting him anything outside of a slot corner where he can, actually add a bit more to an offense than these traditional like kind of screen pass slot corners, where he does have a bit more of a better vertical game that I think people give him credit for, where I think that he can contribute to all three levels of the field on the offense. And this is somebody that I think can get open in a hurry, which is what the Commanders need from their QB, from their wide receiver, so that Daniels can hit them.
Yeah, he's someone that I'm a little bit higher on his outside ability and projection for the NFL. But overall, like you said, this is someone that I think could easily go a lot higher when it comes to the actual draft result. We're trying to get all these players that feel like they're going to go higher, and someone's bound to fall. And Burden just happens to be the guy here. Some other pieces as well. Malachi Stark's falling 27. It's just what happens in the mock sometimes. And Burden's someone that could easily be talked about in as early as maybe like 11 with the 49ers. So this is someone that has a wide draft range, and in this simulation, he fell to 29. We're gonna get some comments, I'm sure, that are people upset that we didn't pick Burden for their team. We understand, it's a heavy debate, but at the same time, just speaking specifically to Burden on the Commanders, I really like it. Cliff runs a lot of wide receiver screens. He likes to get manufactured touches going for his playmakers. And even with Debo in that offense, I think you're still trying to add that element into the passing attack. So I think getting a guy like Burden wouldn't be redundant. I think that both could contribute in the same offense and make plays. Burden's really exciting. He's someone that didn't have the same production, didn't have the same impact as he had in 2023. But overall, I didn't think it was a skill set issue that was the reason. It was just kind of the change in scheme and change in how they went about their passing attack. They got Theo Weiss involved a lot more. Burden's still an absolute stud. Got a lot of attention from opposing defenses. They never wanted to give him a break, and he was still able to find ways to make some splash plays that were still very impressive when you turn on the tape. So I'd be very excited seeing him pair up with Jaden Daniels, and I think that'd be a long-term pairing that would be very dangerous for the rest of the NFC and NFL together. Moving forward to that 30th pick, and this is another guy that probably goes a lot higher, but he's slipped down the board a little bit. Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas for the Buffalo Bills. I think he's someone that is extremely smart, extremely instinctual, makes some great plays, has operated out of the slot, has operated at safety, has operated on the boundary. He can make plays all over the field. Reminds me of Byron Murphy, really. Just someone that you can probably take for granted when you're watching the game, but then you go back and you look at the film specifically for him and you're like, wow, this guy just was playing out of his mind. He's a great player. He makes the plays. He makes the great moments happen. He's someone that you can depend on, and you'll find a role for in that secondary. And for the Bills right now, Dane Jackson looked good when he was a Bill, but overall, he's not necessarily someone you want to trust long term as your starting cornerback. Benford's obviously very talented, but they need some additional pieces to that defensive backs room. And I think Barron can step in, be a cornerback, whether you're trying to rotate him around with Teron Johnson or whether you're playing him on the boundary. I think Barron will find a way to contribute, and I think he can last on the outside, and I think he can make a high impact, especially for Buffalo, a team that desperately needs to kind of shut down the opposing quarterbacks when they go through that AFC gauntlet.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me that Byron Murphy comparison, because I do think maybe Barron's somebody who on wide receiver two sets you kind of put at outside corner. Then when they do add that third wide receiver in, you kind of put him at slot, and maybe Taron Johnson plays outside, or maybe the other way around where you have Taron Johnson as the outside guy. And there's a lot of ways that you can kind of match up here, and really it just how I think it really depends on, do you think Taron Johnson can play outside, or do you think Barron can play outside? Because they kind of, two players who kind of play similar role. But in terms of, kind of if we assume that, the three-man rotation there would work out. This is somebody that I do think would really help the Bills defense take that next step. Their offense is kind of pretty much already set. Maybe you add some guys with speed here, which is what the Bills kind of need, but the board doesn't look great for them in terms of that right now. So you do the next best thing. You bolster up that defense, try to make it as strong as possible for, Mahomes and Burrow and everybody who's coming to get them.
Yeah, it's a dangerous AFC field, so finding ways to limit the opposing offense, definitely a smart strategy. Moving forward, though, the number 31 pick, Kansas City Chiefs used to pick him at 32. A little bit different this year after an unfortunate loss in the Super Bowl for them. What do you have the Chiefs doing so that they can change their fate next season?
Yeah, the Chiefs haven't picked this high in so long. I don't even know what they're gonna do with a high value draft pick like this, but I have them taking Derek Harmon here. Or again, I think this guy is the perfect fit next to Chris Jones. The Chiefs lost almost every defensive line player I think they had last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost like almost everybody took snaps for their team besides Chris Jones on the defensive line. And so they kind of need help here desperately. The reason why I like Harmon so much is he does have that penetrator style on pass rushing downs where you kind of feel good about his pass rushing ability, even when double teamed. And as a run defender, he is also somebody that can kind of maintain his ground on those double teams and let Chris Jones one gap. And he's just the perfect scheme fit for the Chiefs. I don't know what else to say. This is probably my favorite fit player that we have in kind of this back half of the first round, where I think this is such an obvious fit, such an obvious scheme win, and such a good player for what the Chiefs like to do.
Yeah, Harmon fits in well, and I think he'd play well off of Jones. Get that pass rushing ability, get that lateral quickness that Harmon brings to the table, and I think there's a lot to be excited about. Continuing to bolster the trenches, re up in a position that's kind of been decimated by the free agency cycle. Sean Wharton now in Carolina, some other pieces on that defensive line, just heading to new locations. Getting Harmon in there, I think it reupholsters the unit, and I think you're going into 2025 feeling very confident about how you continue to maintain that talent there in that position group. But moving forward to 32, the Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. I haven't gone Donovan Jackson. I think it's really that easy. I think this is a guy that is, in my mind, the top interior offensive lineman in this draft. I think he's just an absolute stud at the guard position. He definitely moved over to tackle, and I think he showed some nice flashes, some nice tape. But I think when you put this guy at guard, you just see what he can do that's special. Speaking of Harmon, I mean, you watched that first Oregon matchup, and I think Donovan Jackson had that man in the pressure cooker. He was just completely neutralizing their defensive line all game. He's someone that I just think is tremendous on tape. I have very little questions. He has great size, great speed, great athleticism, great play strength. He sustains his blocks. And I think adding him to that Philadelphia offensive line that prides itself on winning in the trenches, this is how you do it. And that's how you continue to be dominant for the Philadelphia Eagles in the way that Harry Roseman knows best.
Yeah, when you look at the Eagles, obviously coming off that Super Bowl victory, this is one of the two stars I think they lost. The other guy is C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who they traded, and obviously they traded him. Maybe they're a bit more confident in having a replacement in-house than him. Thank God we had the Ravens take Starks, because if he lasted here to the Eagles, that would have been disgusting. Him in that role. So yeah, Jackson's a good pick. I think he is somebody who would be better for the Eagles than Becton, who they kind of turned into a serviceable guard. Like he was a good guard for them, but the Eagles with a great guard kind of open up the running game even more. If the, I don't even know if that's possible, but and I think he is somebody who can maybe a bit better at the pass protection than Becton. Becton was kind of falling off in that second half of the year in pass protection. So you get somebody a little bit more reliable there, keeps Hurts as clean as he can in that pocket. And yeah, this is I think somebody who can elevate that offensive line to the next level.
Yeah, and we talked about some other options. Ariante Ursary is someone that we think could be very intriguing for stepping into that right guard spot and then maybe eventually replacing Lane Johnson at right tackle if he were to retire in the next year or two. It could be interesting. There's definitely a lot of options for Philadelphia to utilize. Tyreek Williams, especially, is someone that's very strong on that defensive line, could continue to add to that rotation with Milton Williams going. Maybe Jack Sawyer could step in terms of replacing Josh Sweat. There's options for them on the outside. So it's going to be exciting to see how this draft falls out. We're going to have more mocks before the official mock or NFL draft comes along. We'll have the profiles coming every day, but we want to thank you guys for tuning in. That's Bailey Kumar. I'm Michael Rochman, and that's the 2 Minute Drill.